Hey there, and thanks for tuning into this video. This is my regular Sunday broadcast that I'm getting back into. It took me about through the last year in the summer of 2025. I'm restarting it up here in the summer of 2026. And to be honest with you, because this is stuff that I really enjoy doing, it's the research and the kind of looking at the spiritual text and how we can apply it here in this world now in 2026, because there's a lot going on in the world. And you know what I'm feeling a lot is I feel that people are really waking up to who they are, but they're also getting a little frustrated with the old paradigm. And then the people that are still holding on to the old paradigm, they're struggling with this. They're getting really upset. And it's just like anything else in the world. Change really starts to bring out emotions in everybody. And so this is one of the things that we want to start chatting about and start doing the inner work. Many, many years ago, I had a spiritual teacher that she used to have a very thick Polish accent. And she used to say to us, if you don't do your homework, she was talking about you're going home, you're meditating and working on yourself as a person and working on your soul's plan and all that other kind of stuff. She said that this new world that's coming is going to rip you apart. And she wasn't trying to be mean or anything like that. What she was trying to say is that when you really look at the current world, I mean, there's something daily that there may be something that doesn't bother you, but then there's something else that will. And what didn't bother you will bother somebody else. And that's all because we're all coming from different vantage points and different perspectives. So one of the things this talk is about is the mystic path, the wrestle before the dawn. And so we're going to chat about that. Because one of the things that we try to do in the healing world and the spiritual world and even in religion is they're trying to take you from this place to this place. And so you're trying to become something. And the reality is you are already that. And we're going to talk about that. And that's what we're going to be chatting about in this particular video. So let's just jump right into it. Because when you really, I guess I should show you my screen, shouldn't I? So when we chat about this again, like I said, is the mystic path, the wrestle before the dawn, from forgetting to remembrance, remembering who you already were. And so let's just kind of jump to the next slide, because this is what I'm talking about. The opening question I want to ask you is this: have you ever felt like part of you knows exactly who you are, while another part of you is terrified to become that person? Now, we can take this into a lot of parts of our life. We can take this as that, there's a part of you that's changing, and the people that you're around, or your family or your loved ones and the people you care about, they still want to do certain things, and you're not feeling that anymore. I mean, or you're not feeling it as much as you did before. And so that's okay. That's okay for you to change, and people that love you will change with you. And so these are kind of things that we have to start looking at. So you're starting to change who you are. So you're feeling like part of you knows exactly who you are, while another is terrified to become that person. So you're terrified because you don't want to lose your friendships. You want to lose your loved ones. You don't want to lose all that kind of stuff. But the step forward is a transformation into who you're supposed to become in the first place. And so you had to go through the experiences you had before to become who you are now. But now that you're starting to change, that means that how you perceive the world, how you interact with the world, and how you act and engage with the world is going to change as well, and how the world engages with you. So we're afraid of losing what we all previously had. And I mean, this is something that happens to all of us. I mean, we start looking at things and going, well, I don't know, if you're getting ready to change a job, or you're ready to, move out of your parents' house when you're 18, when you go to college, when you leave college, there's all kinds of change. The one thing we do know is that change is constant in our life. And so when we start to look at these things, the great forgetting. So one of the things we look at is if we're divine children, in other words, if we're children of the great source, or whatever you want to call, whatever name you want to come up with it tells you that you are that as well. You're a part of that family. So, but it's proven in ancient tradition. So ancient traditions teach that humanity suffers not because we are broken or bad, or that we've done something wrong, so to speak, but because we have forgotten our true nature. Let me say that one more time. We are not broken or bad. We have forgotten our true nature. And this is consistent in Hebrew mysticism, early Christianity, the Mandaean traditions, Gnostic wisdom, and Norse mythology. Those are just to name a few. But the journey begins when with forgetting and ends with remembering. So in our life, we are starting to go. We come in here. We're veiled when we're born, and at that point, we're still kind of close. But as we start going through life and we start looking at all these things where, we're trying to fit in, and we're trying, teenage years, you're trying to, get friends and people that care about you, and, are feeling the world the way you are. You don't want to look weird and all that kind of stuff. You start putting on masks. You start putting on this act or these things that to try to actually be a part of a community or a part of something. And so, but there is another tradition or another way of looking at a pattern that we can see in people's life, and you can see it in almost every single person's life, even at some level. So you start looking at this universal pattern where every spiritual tradition tells us the story in a different language. So there's unity, forgetfulness, separation, struggle, awakening, remembrance, and return. So rinse and repeat. We keep on going through this cycle where we come in, we're part of this unity consciousness before we're born. Then we come into the life and we forget who we are. And then we feel this sense of separation from where we came from. And then we struggle in our life. And then we finally awaken and we remember, and then we return. And then we repeat the cycle until one day we no longer have to go through that cycle again. So when you look at it, you can see people that go into their life, they go into professions that they didn't like because their parents said they had to, because they had to pick at some kind of profession that, made better money so they could give security to their family. And so right there, we're already still starting to build this idea that something outside of us, a good job, is what's going to give us security instead of what's going on inside of us that's going to give us security. It's already creating that separation from your abundance and your prosperity and all the things that your birthright, so to speak. You're separating from your birthright, from the family that you are a part of, the divine family, and you start to go, and then you finally start to remember. So I'm going to touch on Mandaean traditions, because this is one of the few Gnostic traditions that there are still people that practice this today. I looked it up. There's about 60 or 70,000 Mandaeans around the world. And one of their central characters is Yushamin. And Yushamin was a being of light who forgets his relationship to the great life and begins acting from self-will. So think about this for a second. Anytime you set out in life and you start to think about, hey, I want to go ahead and do this, or I want to set out for this goal, do you immediately start to go in? Some of you might. Do you immediately start to go in and start meditating on it, or reflecting on it, and working with your inner spirit and working with that divine temple inside of you, prayer or meditation or whatever? Do you start doing that first, or do you automatically start jumping in and thinking about all the people that you can get involved in, all this kind of stuff, and start acting in the physical world? One of the things I've started doing is I start going in and I start going, all right, I know you'll send me the right and perfect people for the right and perfect situation. And if this is in my highest and best good to do this, you'll make it easy. And this is interesting, because one of the things I've been started doing too is one of the things is, like all of us, I've been hurt by a lot of people. I felt betrayed and all that kind of stuff. And then I realized that they weren't part of my divine plan. So the natural ego starts to go in and goes, well, I don't know if I trust anybody anymore. But if you in your prayer said, I know, to your inner world, to your inner spirit, to that divine temple, if you start saying, I know you're going to send me the right and perfect people that are going to match my energy. And you're basically commanding it. You're commanding the energy, because what ends up happening is you change this inner dynamics. Instead of the inner dynamics starting to say, oh, I don't want to have anybody else that I don't want to get hurt again. I don't want to have that. That energy is starting to attract more people, and that's going to hurt you. The more that with you resist, persists. But if you start saying, I know that you're going to bring the right and perfect people that are going to match my energy in the highest and best good. And if I'm meant to do this, all the elements, all the finances, all the experiences, all the people, they're all going to be right there at the right and perfect time. And I don't have to worry about anything, because you're going to make it easy and it's going to flow, and I will fall into flow with that. You're talking to your inner temple, your higher self, whatever you want to refer to it, God. And you're really starting to think, because the first illusion is separation from source. And this is what the story of Yushamin is starting to tell us. So who is Yushamin? He's one of the highest heavenly beings in Mandaean cosmology. He's a powerful being of light beneath the ultimate source or the great life. He's not a prophet, so unlike John the Baptist in their stories, he is not a human messenger. He is not equivalent to God. He occupies an exalted rank beneath the great life, and he's not portrayed as evil. He is a being of light. Unlike the story of Satan in Christianity, he's not depicted as evil. He's depicted as a great light that has lost its connection to the great life or source. So what makes the Yushamin important is he becomes a symbol of what happens when a being forgets its proper relationship to the source. So the source of life. Imagine if a tree forgot that it needed the sun to give it energy and photosynthesis wasn't happening. Imagine what would happen if the tree wasn't surviving. Then that would affect human beings and all other things on the planet as well. So when you start to think about this, everything is interconnected. And when we start to look at this interconnectedness, and when we block ourselves, it's much like your body. If something's not working right, then the body can't be healthy. If you're not fulfilling what you are spiritually supposed to do or in your divine plan, then something's going to be out of balance. And you'll feel like you're burdened or something like that if you're not doing what your soul is asking you to do. So in the Mandaean story, we've got pride and separation. Now, I'm not talking about being proud of yourself. That's not what we're talking about. It's a totally different story. But Yushamin desires authority and creative power beyond what has been given to him. He attempts to elevate himself and act independently as the great life. In other words, he's saying, I'm going to do it on my own. I don't need you anymore. And instead of, flowing as a community of spirit. And so as a result, this conflict within him starts to arise, and disorder follows because he has this inner struggle and this connection. His light starts to dim, and he's corrected by higher wisdom. So as he's in resistance, his life starts to get more challenging, or his existence, whatever you want to call it. And his story becomes a cautionary tale about pride and separation. So we're not separate. We're not separate. I'm not separate from you, those that are watching this video. You're not separate from me. We're all interconnected. We do have our own physical personalities, but we're not technically separated from source. We're not separated from the planet. We're not separated from individuals we're all connected together. And so why does this matter about the talk? So we forget, then we search. And so Yushamin's story mirrors a pattern many of us experience. We forget who we are and begin searching outside of ourselves for what we already possess. So we seek approval. We already had approval. The approval comes from you. It comes from you and the higher self. So when you're in alignment with your higher self, the approval is there, not some being separate from you, your higher self, you. And so that's the lie. You were told that God is separate from you and God lies within you, or spirit or source or whatever you want to call it. We get hung up on these dang words. And then because we're looking for approval, we're looking for validation in our life. So it's nice to get compliments and all that stuff. And it's nice that people approve of what we do, but we have to start and act on our soul. And if our soul says to do something, you do it and you continue forward. We look for status. We look for status to inflate our ego so that our ego feels better about itself, because it's already, remember, it feels separate. It feels alone. It doesn't feel connected. And because it's not connected to source, it's causing a whole bunch of other problems because of this broken connection that was really not broken. It's just we're not seeing it. And so, and then we start to establish ourselves with power and then control. And because we try to exert our power over other people, and this could happen in an employer situation, it can happen with governments, it can happen with individuals and relationships, and we start to exert this power. But the reality is nobody is better than anybody else. We're all interconnected. We're all a part of source. We're all a part of God. And so not because we're bad, but because we've forgotten the connection to source, and we're all flowing together. And when we're in resistance, then that starts to, we're not communicating with each other. And you can see that in the world right now. Nobody's communicating. And the real sin, if you really had to call something a sin, because it's called missing the mark, is not the connectedness. And so somebody will say, well, that's really hard considering blah, 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 blah. Well, if you went within and you started working on yourself, and you started working on finding peace, and you started working on finding connection within yourself, I can guarantee you, like I said before, the right and perfect people will come into your life and they will flow with you, and you will be fully empowered to live the life authentically that you were born to be. And as a result of that, your light will shine even brighter, and it will shine the truth on everybody else, and they will see it, because you'll touch somebody's life that'll touch somebody else's life, and touch somebody else's life, and touch somebody else's life. And then that's how we're going to change this planet. We're not going to change it by going out and fighting with people. Now, yes, it doesn't mean we can't speak our truth. Well, what I'm getting at is you'll do it in a sense of truth and understanding and love. And love isn't always all love and light, love and light. Sometimes love is harsh truth. But the reality is you'll do it from a sense of not trying to beat somebody down. You'll just do it because it's the truth, at least your truth. And so that's one of the things we can start to doing. So the other thing that happens is we try to compare ourselves to people. We had, this person has a better job, this person's smarter, this person has a higher degree, this person can do this person can do that. You are supposed to do exactly what you're supposed to do where you're at. So if you're cleaning houses or hotel rooms, or if you're do that type of work, you're exactly where you need to. And you have no idea, when you're out there cleaning, your energy of joy affects the area you're cleaning. So you're not just cleaning dust or all that kind of stuff. You're cleaning the energy when you're in there. And if you're a medical professional, a nurse, or a doctor, if your energy is high and you're looking at what you're doing as a calling, and your heart is open to that, then that energy passes along to your patients. If you're a call center representative and you're really getting in there and you're opening your heart up, yes, you're going to be speaking to people that are going to be nasty to you. Hey, did call center work? You're going to talk to people nasty to you. But if you are always showing up with yourself and building more peace inside of yourself and really alchemizing yourself and really showing up and being there with your soul, then guess what? Those sometimes 60 to 100 to 200 people you're going to talk to in a day, you're going to touch them with your light and your truth. So the comparison kills. Comparison kills, and it kills our energy, and it kills where we're at. And you have no idea. You may be doing this right now, and it's preparing you for the next step. So what call center did for me is it helped me find peace, because as I was being screamed at, yelled at, called names, and all that kind of stuff, I would literally go within and start saying, this is not about you. And then I would have to tell them the truth, whatever it is that they didn't want to hear, but I would do it in a way that was kind and truthful. And it started helping me practice. And then that energy and that practice helped me in all aspects of my life. So looking at these, the Mandaean tradition, we got Yushamin, who's forgetting relationship to source. Then we got Genesis, Adam, who's separation from Eden. This is him. Eden is that connection to source, that Garden of Eden, so to speak. And in Gnosticism, we have Sophia, who's acting apart from the fullness. So in the story of Sophia, she has her own child separate from Elohim. So the wholeness of who she is. And then Jacob, the Jacob story is that Jacob is wrestling with identity. And then in this particular talk, we're talking about the false identity. So forgetting the sovereign self. So you're forgetting who you are on an authentic, spiritual, soulful level. So when we start to go deeper into this and we start talking about this interpretation that I'm coming up with here, is that Yushamin represents the moment consciousness forgets its connection to the divine and begins seeking externally what can only be remembered internally. So Yushamin represents the forgetting that makes the journey necessary in the first place. So Yushamin forgets, John remembers, Jacob, he wrestles with himself. So we have this awakening where we start to see the world differently. John is the baptism happens. You start to see the world differently. So that can be in things like a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience, where the whole world just flashes before you. You're like, wow, everything is different than what I was told. So that's the awakening. That's the remembering. But once you have the awakening, and you can talk to a lot of people that have had a near-death experience, they struggle when they come back. Because now you got two worlds fighting against each other. You've got this near-death experiences that come and talk about all the things that they're experiencing, and their family and loved ones and their friends are like, you're crazy. Or you've had an awakening where you've had an intuitive hit, or you've had an out-of-body experience, or whatever, or you've read some text and the whole world just changes in front of you. So these are called awakening experiences. And so when you have these experiences, then the whole world changes you. The world's going to be in resistance to this. So some people just jump back into the shell and forget. But some people stand up and say no. And when they say no and they finish this struggle inside, when the war inside ends, then the bridge appears. And then the dawn arrives, and then you awaken to a new part of yourself. You're reborn again, so to speak. And so I talked about this in my last talk last Sunday, but I talked about the 7 archons, and I was suggesting that maybe they were lessons. They were ways for us to look at ourselves in a different way and really start to go within and say, wait, so why am I in fear? Why am I in shame? Why am I comparing? Why am I approval seeking? Why do I have these limitations? And who told me about these limitations? Where did they come from? And then, of course, that separation and then false identity. So awareness is one of the key things that you're going to do to start changing your life. And so when you start asking these questions and digging deeper, and I talk about this in my book, The Sovereign Mindset, is about the questions. I give a lot of questions in that book that makes you start to think and go, why is it that this is happening? And why is it that I've done this consistently over and over? Not to blame, but to say, wait a second, this theme keeps on happening. And why? Why do I keep on making these choices? So that you can break the pattern, because awareness helps you break the pattern. So Johanna is the Mandaean name for John the Baptist. And so when you look at John the Baptizer, the voice of remembrance, John says in the Mandaean text, he says, I have not forgotten. He repeatedly says this, I have not forgotten. So I want you to say that in your meditation, in your prayer, I have not forgotten. And you're going to basically saying, I have not forgotten who I am on a soulful level. I have not forgotten. And so the question you have to ask yourself, what have you forgotten about yourself? I was just thinking about how I was when I was a teenager. And I remember I would play trombone, and I would play my trombone over and over and over again. And I used to love this jazz musician named Chuck Mangione. And also now I'm going to Maynard Ferguson was one of my favorites as well. And so I would sit there, and there was one song that Maynard Ferguson would do called Chameleon. And I would just play it over and over and over because I just thought it was the coolest song. And I was hoping that our band director would let us do it, but he let us play it like one time, and that was it. But the point is that I remember how joyful I was about music. And then I'd forgotten that for a long time. And then I had a relationship come in, and I used to play video games and all that other kind of stuff. And I had literally forgotten that because adulting happened. But then I started, when I met this relationship, that person gave me permission. In other words, they played a lot of video games. And so I started playing them as well. And so then I was able to share that with my friends and really start to dive deeper into myself on why. So that's that playful spirit inside of us that enjoys things. So if you have something that you did a long time ago and that you have pulled to do it again, do it. If it's not harming anybody, then do it. Allow yourself to play and enjoy your life. So it's one of those things. So I have not forgotten. I have not forgotten who I am, who I was at 15. I have not forgotten who I was at 25. I've not forgotten who I am as a soul. And then you really start to change what's going on inside of you. And what ends up happening when you think about John the Baptist, he baptized Jesus. And so when you think about the water that he uses to baptize, it's living water. So living water washes away the impurities of our thoughts and our limitations and our fear and our shame. So what I want you to do is I want you to close your eyes just really quick. And I want you to just imagine this living, soulful, divine water flowing down from the top of your head all the way through your body. And this living water you're connected to. Your body is literally a part of this living water. And you feel this wave of energy just going back and forth all the way down to your toes, then past your toes. And it's interconnected. And you just start to feel that. And as you're doing that, you may feel this sense of renew, because it's what baptism is about, washing away the old so that the new aspect of you can come in. And then as you start to clear away all those things that made you forget, you get to what? You start to remember, and then you get to return to light. And light is truth about who you are. So the living water symbolizes consciousness itself. And as you start to resubmerge into consciousness, then you what? As John says in John chapter 4, verses 10 through 14. He says, whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. They'll never thirst because they're going to be awakened and really opened up into the new aspects of themselves. So they'll understand that, yes, I can slap myself and I matter, but I also know that there is a living spirit that is flowing through all of us. And so when you feel that, that living spirit also has a connection and has a loving voice and it has a loving guidance, and that's who you are. You're an aspect of that, and that is your higher self, your higher consciousness. So then we go into the Jacob and his wrestling message. So Jacob wrestles through the night with a mysterious figure. So who is this? Was it God, an angel, or was it himself? And we're all one. In a sense, he is arguing or wrestling or struggling with the inner aspects of himself because he's in resistance to who he truly is on a divine soulful level. And so we can call that whatever we want, but he's literally has a war going on inside of him. And so when you really think about this, I mean, don't you have a war going on inside of yourself? You know, you want to know, you know, somebody says something to you, it starts to upset you, and there's a part of you, they call you a name or whatever, and then you start to go, you start to get really upset about it. And what do they really, and if you can pause and say, well, wait a second, is that really true? And so when you start to look at it, all the voices that are going on in your head, all the emotions that are going on in your body, who told you whatever it is that's keeping you struggling? You know, somebody says that you're not attractive or you're ugly. Who told you that? Did you tell yourself that? Or did you pick that up from somebody else? Did you pick that up from television? Did you pick that up? And it's not true. And so when you realize it's not true, and you really start accepting yourself for who you are on a soulful level, I can guarantee you the outside will start changing. The physical will start changing. Now, will it magically change? Well, no, but here's the deal. You won't have the resistance to doing the things that it takes to become healthier. And the energy of life, that consciousness, that living water will be flowing through you and giving you new life to act in a new path that gets you more in alignment with who you are as a soul. So somebody will say, well, I can't do this. You'll start where you start. And if you physically have trouble doing things, you'll start where you start. And then I can guarantee you it'll start getting better because that living water will start helping you heal. As you start taking steps forward and you start acting, it will really start helping you move in that direction. And you're going to get resistance. And when you get resistance, you already know that that's a block or something you have to fall down into and look at. And when the war finally ends, this is when God tells Jacob, you will now have a new name, and it will be Israel. And this is not talking about the country and all the stuff. If you really start looking at this, he has an identity shift. He's reborn again into a new aspect of himself because he stopped forgetting of where he came from, and he's now starting to realize who he always was. Because the inner struggle ended, then the living water started to flow through him. And this is and it's medically, by the way, one of the things that a doctor told me once when I was asking about cancer, she said that cancer are cells that are no longer communicating with each other. Well, that's what we're doing in this world. We're no longer communicating with our hearts on a soulful level. We're too much in our head. And I'm not saying we don't have to be in our head sometimes, but there has to be a balance. And that's where I talked about in the last talk about the rainbow bridge. So your name shall no longer be Jacob, it'll be Israel. And this shows in 32:28. So all these spiritual texts, that we take them so literally, but the truth is they are metaphors to help us understand who we are on a different level. So every awakening has a wilderness. So there's all that dark night of the soul, the shadow, where we're wandering around doing crazy stuff. Trust me, I've done some crazy stuff. So Moses wanders in the desert, Buddha beneath the Bodhi tree. Remember, Kali comes and tries to tempt him. Jesus in the wilderness, Jacob at Jabbok, and then John in the desert. So the wilderness is where the false identities begin to fall away. So you're wandering around the wilderness, you're lost, you're trying to figure yourself out. I've had this. My mother died, and I had already written a book, and I was wandering around the wilderness trying to figure myself out until finally I said, enough is enough. And I started making choices for myself. And I've reconnected with people and that I walked away from because I felt like they were the problem. And the reality is I need to walk away because I needed to find who? Myself. And these are things that you can do yourself. You can start to really look within yourself and start growing. So the Rainbow Bridge, or Bifrost, as we talked about in the last in my last talk last Sunday, it's the bridge between fear to freedom, separation to unity, forgetting to remembrance, and personality to essence. So it really starts to help you start to understand when you open up and you've gone through that lost in the wilderness, so to speak, you get to open yourself up to new heights of who you are. And so the bridge appears when we start, so like I said, stop fighting with ourselves. We stop identifying with the story. We stop seeking approval. So the story is, oh, this is just who I am, because we're literally living in our trauma as opposed to healing the trauma so we can, or we're trying to hold on to something we had in our youth or whatever. And then we seek approval from other people so we can feel better about ourselves inside instead of going within and understanding who we are. And so we begin identifying with awareness. And so when we do that, then the bridge appears, and then that rainbow bridge opens up, and then we have the connection to our higher aspect, and then we're in flow with that living water. So the dawn, this is interesting too, because the sun rose above him as he passed Peniel. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff on the pineal gland and all that other kind of stuff. So Jacob enters the night, and Israel leaves as the dawn breaks. In other words, this opens up in our mind, but we don't have to worry about all that. We just have to start making choices in our life that really start to bring ourselves in. So we stop making ourselves second choice. So we stop making ourselves, I've literally had been the second choice several times in my lifetime, and I knew it, and I allowed it. I've allowed bosses to talk down to me and make me feel like crap. I've allowed other things just because I wanted to have the opportunity. And the reality is when you do that, you really show weakness inside of yourself and started saying, no, that's not for me. That's cool that that's where you're at. And, but that's just not for me, because that's a boundary and saying, I value myself. And it's less about them, and it's more about what's going on in here, because then as the strength starts to come up inside of you, then the universe starts responding to the strength that's in you. So the universe starts bringing you situations that lift your strength up and bring in that abundance and that prosperity. And this is what happened with Jacob becoming Israel. It really started to change who he was. And now he started becoming to that empowered state. And so the energy of the world around him started changing. So what are you wrestling with? So what story? I want you to start asking yourself these questions. What story am I ready to release today? Is it a story of I can't do this, I'm too old, or I'm too fat, or I'm too skinny, or whatever, or I have kids, I can't do it? What fear am I ready to face? So there's always a fear. There's something in there, and people say, "Well, I don't have any fear." I'm like, BS. And so, what fear are you ready to face? What is it in you that you're afraid of? Is it because you don't have the energy, or is it because this, or is it because you're afraid of people's judgment, that people aren't going to love you and all that kind of stuff? Because if you're worried about people loving you, it's you that's not loving you. So what truth am I ready to remember? So the truth about who you truly are. Are you ready to face that? And we all have this resistance. I have this resistance. I started doing this for a year ago and started coming back, and because I let life get ahead of me and all that other kind of stuff. What bridge am I being called to cross? So am I going to cross and finish this lesson, or am I going to hold back because I want to hold on to that old life and that old identity of who I am? So every awakening begins with honest questions. You have to start asking yourself these questions so you can start what? Growing. So going, kind of wrapping this up a little bit, the mystic path, the universal teaching, Yushamin forgot, Yushamin forgot, John remembered, Jacob wrestled, the bridge appeared. So this is really just a cycle where it's saying you forget, you remember, you struggled and wrestled, and when you end the struggle, everything starts to appear and fall in your lap. So, and then what I want you to do is I want you to start meditating, and I want you to just take a second really quick. Take a deep breath in. Hold it and let it all out. Keep on doing that. Deep breaths in. And I want you to ask the question, what have I forgotten about who I really am? And I'm not asking you about some mystical thing. Who are you really? Who are you beneath all of the stuff, beneath all the story and the fears and the pain and the anxiety and all the things that make you who you are today? Who are you beyond that story? And I want you to start asking yourself that question every day. Who am I really? How am I showing up in the world? Am I showing up authentically? And so, really, these are just kind of some pronunciations for the words that I use, or the names and stuff like that, so you can get them, because the vibration of these are powerful. Yohana, Yushamin, and these kind of, when you really think about it, they're enunciations, the phonics of these particular words and languages. And so this is just kind of references that I used to do this talk. And so I thank you for watching. My website is jeremymcdonald.net. You can book appointments with me there. You can buy my book there, The Sovereign Mindset, and you can find out a lot more about me. I am very open to coming and speaking at online events or other events, and we can discuss that as well. So I hope you all like this. And one of the ways you can help me is like and share this particular video. And much love. Thank you so much. And I'm grateful to be able to be here and tell you who you are. You are an empowered being. Yeah, say it louder.